Welcome to the Ishtar channel. I'm here with the lovely Ishtar and myself, Joe Rushton. And we've been having a little chat and we feel really called to have a conversation with you about the subject of disconnection. And often we find spoken today in social media, amongst friends, a lot of reporting on the news of late, that more and more, certainly post-COVID, but more and more there is the feeling of being alone, loneliness, feeling separate from others. And what we really wanted to dive in today was the subject of disconnection and how it's actually through disconnection with ourselves that we start to feel alone and feelings of loneliness. So Ishtar, take us on a journey of what it is to be connected, and when we're not, why it is we end up feeling disconnected.
Thanks, Joe. When we're looking at disconnection and when we're looking at loneliness and separation to our community, to our friends, to unable to connect in any meaningful way, it's invariably because we have this disconnection with our own spirit. Because whatever's happening on the outside of us, whether, in the world around us, is invariably what's happening inside of us on our spiritual level, because each one of us is a spiritual being. And we forget this at times. We just think we're these humans walking around in this body, doing whatever we do. But in truth, we are spiritual beings, and we have a soul energy and that guides us, what I like to call a higher consciousness that guides us. And when we are not connected to that part of ourselves, we will always feel alone. We feel there's something missing. And so what happens, we spend a lot of our time on this something's missing in our lives. And we then want to chase that something missing.
Search for it.
Yeah, we go out and look for it. And then we go out and we look for it in all different places. And of course, often we get very disappointed because we can't find it. And we search for it invariably today. It's always through technology. It's through the platforms of social media. It's no longer going out so much and mixing with others trying to find it. We're looking for it on those sort of platforms. And of course, we're not going to find it there. We get lots of knowledge, a lot of information comes our way. Some of it's relevant, some of it's not, but it can be very, very confusing and it overwhelms us. But there's no connection in that. There's no connection to our truth, there's no connection to our spirit, and ultimately there's no connection to our soul.
And so all of those avenues are actually, whilst we think we are creating a connection, they're actually taking us further away from ourselves. They do,
they take us further away. And so we get more and more disappointed because we're not finding what we're looking for. No matter where we're looking for it, we're not finding it because we're looking for it in other people, or we're looking for it on some technology platform, whether it be if we're doing games or whatever it might be, virtual reality, as someone was talking to me about the other day. Wherever we're going for it, we're, down the pub, no matter where we are, we're still finding that there's something missing. And in that we feel disconnected. And it's because we're actually disconnected with us, with who we are. And that creates a lot of emptiness within us. And as I was talking to you about the other day, there's a lot of research coming out now about this in our communities. And there was research just recently saying that the middle-aged men are the loneliest and in our community these days. And the percentage of suicide in middle-aged men is very high now because they're feeling extremely disconnected to their souls. And young people too are feeling disconnected because they're not connected to their soul. And what happens when we're not connected to our soul? We do understand on some level that something is missing. And so this is why we seek it out. We don't know what we're seeking out, but we're looking for it, whatever it might be. And the thing is that when we believe that something's missing within us, then we begin to live from a place of lack. And so that energy of lack tends to fill all the parts of our life. It tends to flow out into many, many parts of our life.
So we start to focus more on what we don't have.
Yes. But we don't have. We don't have this. We don't have that. We want this. We want that. And there's a lot of this wanting, needing, filling these gaps. And yet, no matter how much we do that, we're still not finding what we're really looking for.
So would you say the first step is to, first of all, become aware that you are stepping outside of your center, that you're actually being distracted?
Yeah.
That as much as we, at face value, think that being on a screen is creating this false sense of connection. So is our first step then to come into an awareness that it is actually a false sense of connection?
I actually believe that the first step, the very first step, is to come into the acknowledgement and the acceptance of who you are. And I don't mean who your ego is. I don't mean your personality that you present to the world, your image that you've created around yourself, your persona that is your armor of protection. I mean really to understand that you are a spiritual being, you are a soul sitting in this physical body. Because until you actually come to that acceptance, then how can you make a connection to that part of you? You can't, because you're not accepting or believing that you are. You have this soul, you have this spirit, whatever you want to call it. You have this other energy that is consciousness within you. And if you don't really believe that or accept that, then it's going to be very hard for you to make a connection to that part of you.
And so for those that are listening to this concept perhaps for the first time, and they may have, as you've said, been seeking exactly what you're speaking of and seeking an experience of that consciousness of themselves. But because we're speaking of something that's not tangible, hence why we go and pick up something that is tangible, how would you guide somebody who is listening to you right now and a part of them feels like the words are lofty and how do I have an experience of what Ishtar's speaking of? There's a part of me that says, that's exactly what I'm craving and yearning for. But how do I make that first step towards?
Well, the first thing is once again, as I said, come in, look at your acceptance and your belief. Because if you believe that you are not a soul, that you are just the mind in a physical body, it won't really matter what you go and experience, because while you're holding that belief, nothing's going to change. Yeah?
Yep.
So that's the first step, is really honouring what your beliefs are. And if you don't believe you're a soul in this physical body and you think you really are just the mind, well, that's fine. That's your belief. And that's okay. But honour and accept that that's where you are. You know, that's what your belief is. And therefore, you will be able to, from that acknowledgement, create and manage your life from that place. But if you do, if you're listening to what I'm saying now and you go, yes, I do understand that I am this conscious spiritual being in some form and I'm not just this mind in a physical body, then you are going to want to have that experience of meeting that part of yourself. And this is what it is. It's actually meeting that part of yourself. And it's so important to firstly come to that acceptance and the belief of who you are, because you can't meet a part of yourself that you don't believe in, So firstly, to find that belief and that faith, because once again, it is that part of you that is not tangible. It's not solid like this table. And so you really do need to have a belief in it. And then once you have a belief in it, I suggest you can go and have an experience, and experiences are great. And, we're going to talk about experiences in another podcast and the purpose of them. But really understand, go and have an experience so you can meet that experience of yourself. But I can tell you right now, that experience won't sustain you long term. So go and find that experience, however you choose to find it, go and find it for yourself. But you will probably need to find a teacher or a mentor, someone who can help you make that experience sustainable. In other words, something that becomes part of your life so that you have a daily connection with your soul and your spirit, consciously aware of it. Yeah. And in that way, you won't feel alone, and you'll stop thinking that there's something missing. Yeah? Because once you make that connection, there is no part of you missing, because you're present and connected to that part of you. And so you won't feel this incredible disconnection that we're feeling. And it's becoming more and more in our society today across all levels, not just the Western world, but across all levels. There's this huge disconnection that we're feeling with each other, with our communities, with our families, with our country, with governments, with each other. You know, we've seen this not just through COVID. I think it came up in COVID, but it was always there. It just was magnified through COVID so that we could have a look at it. But it's been there for quite some time as in this industrial world, we've just moved out away from that connection.
Yeah.
And it's been so important for us to understand that what we're really feeling that we haven't got is actually that soul presence, that deep connection to this spiritual part of ourselves. And however that flows for you, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be, as I said, you don't have to go and wear white and you know, chant mantras and do Om to have that experience. Yeah. They're tools that people use, but they may not be right for you. There are many ways to have that experience. You need to find the way that is for you, and a way that's sustainable, that you can live your life through, and so that every day you have that experience.
Because wouldn't you say that because of the nature of our spirit and the nature of our very being, that connection, once we've come into an acknowledgement of who we are and what we are, and we start to nurture and nourish that connection to our consciousness, would you say that in truth there's no end to that experience?
No,
it will
not at all.
Just continue
it grows.
to evolve and grow, and so the connection equally evolves and grows.
Yes, as much as you allow it to.
Yeah,
because you have control over it, and it's as much as you allow it to. Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing. It's about making that choice to allow that connection to grow and evolve for you on whatever level, that you're prepared to have that connection, you know, that deeper consciousness of your being, to become more present in your life, and to be present and be here, and not so much working through that mind and that ego self that is constantly in need, that's constantly wanting, that's constantly in reaction. Because while those things are happening, you are disconnected to your soul. And I think the other thing is to remember that I like to tell everyone, and this comes from my work with the masters over many years, is that the presence of the divine within you, whether it be your soul or your higher consciousness or any part of you that is aligned to the light of consciousness and the universal consciousness, is always present within you. It doesn't go away. It actually isn't something you really have to go and find somewhere else, because it's actually always here. And it's just waiting patiently for you to make a choice to connect with it. It's never anywhere else. It's
so
always
we're never
here with
disconnected from our soul or our spirit.
No.
It's simply the illusion we create through the ego.
Yeah. And we do create that disconnection through that denying of that part of ourselves, or through hiding that part of ourselves, or locking that part of ourselves away. But that part of ourselves doesn't judge. It just sits there very patiently saying, when they're ready, we'll be here.
So for anyone who's listening and feels called to now explore more and look at changing the ways that they are seeking their connection, out of the many schools that you have channeled through the masters over the years, which school would you guide somebody to go look at a little bit more deeply?
Well, there's only one school for this, is the Master's Way, because the Master's Way is 3 levels of self-mastery. It takes you through 3 very different levels of consciousness to awaken and to embrace that part of yourself that is that higher consciousness of you, that higher wisdom, that place of you that's very connected to the creation energy. And it gives you the tools to practice every day in your life. And that's one of the keys. It's about self-mastery, because it calls to you to actually put these tools and these teachings into practice. Because as we will talk about in another podcast about experience, you can go and have lots of experiences, but unless you're actually practicing,
Yes.
you know, the teachings in your life every day, there's no real experience that's ongoing and sustainable. It's just an experience that you talk about, that you have a memory of, that it might last for a few months and make you feel great, and you can tell everybody at your next dinner party or, you know, over Zoom or whatever it might be for you, but it's not sustainable.
Yes.
And this is important, that we become sustainable with this conscious connection of ourselves. And in that way, we become conscious in our life, which I know a lot of people are looking for, but they want to become conscious through their mind. And you can't become conscious through your mind, no matter how much you want to. The mind will not make you conscious.
And we will be diving more deeply in another podcast about the mind, because I know that a lot of you listening to us right now are probably thinking, well, how else do you become conscious but through the mind? And it's a journey to understand the difference between our mind and the consciousness of the mind versus our consciousness through our heart's consciousness. So having walked the many schools with Ishtar and the masters, and having gone through Master's Way, Path of Light, Path of Love, and Path of Mystery, I can, from first hand, can completely speak to the life-changing teachings within that 3-year self-mastery course. So if you feel called to have a look further, then please have a look at our website and have a look at Ishtar's three years of self-mastery, traveling with the masters. Thank you for listening.
Blessings.